Monday comes early. This chapter closes. A new door opens. This is the second shift.
I can't imagine anything worse than not having any kind of support systems. My support system is family. And if there's one message I want to get out to your listeners is if you have any problems, family-related problems, if for some reason you've drifted apart, or especially if you haven't gotten along with each other, please think about mending it. Old age is lonely, and family are the ones that know your history, and you can share stories. And it would be so empty if I didn't have all of them in my life and be close to them. And that's definitely helped keep me going.
On today's episode of the Second Shift podcast, we welcome Dr. Fred Dennis, a now retired emergency medicine physician who has done a bit of everything in his long medical career, from 37 years in clinical medicine to numerous non-clinical administrative roles. He recently faced the biggest shift of all after his wife suffered some significant health problems just as they were about to enter those golden years that they had prepared so diligently for decades. He is full of hard-earned and sage advice for the rest of us. I know you're going to enjoy this episode. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Second Shift podcast. I'm your host, Brian Jepson. I recently retired from medicine and work full-time as a financial planner. We're going to have to excuse my co-host today, Aaron Millage. He is working for the military, serving our country this weekend. So we excuse him. But I'm very excited to introduce our guest today. It's Dr. Fred Dennis. He is MD, MBA, and a fellow of the American Academy of Emergency Physicians, American College of Emergency Physicians. I should know that, right? I'm part of that too. So, Fred, thank you for joining us. I want to talk a little bit about your bio first, and then we'll get into some questions and get into your story. I think you have a very interesting and impactful story that I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to learn a lot from. So, Fred, the most current thing I think is that you are the anticipated chair of the Exploring Retirement section of the American College of Emergency Physicians. Now, we had Dr. Stephen Anderson as a guest recently, also, who is the acting or the current president. When do you take over, Fred?
In October, and I anticipate I will be the chair. It's just that we had to postpone the elections. We've had sort of hands up elections in the past. And so officially, according to ASAP, I am not the chair until the meeting that we're going to be having in Chicago. That's when we pass the baton.
Well, I do want to talk a little bit about that at the end if we have time, just because I think it's such a valuable section within our college, that I don't know how many other specialty colleges have something like that. But I think it's valuable because so many people within medicine are exploring retirement and trying to figure out what that looks like for them. And this is getting those people together and those who have gone through it and helping, I think, ease the journey for the rest of us. So I think it's a wonderful section to be in. So you've got a very long and storied career with all kinds of different things. Let me hit a few highlights. So you did your medical school training in Canada, in Toronto, and then set up a general practice after it looks like some general practice training. And so you started out your career in general practice in a small town in British Columbia, and then you found your calling. Is that right? So at that point you were doing all things that general practitioners do, including working in the emergency department, and discovered that the emergency department was where you felt at home. And so that led you to a emergency medicine program at McGill University, which is in Montreal. But at the time, there was no emergency medicine specialty in Canada, so you moved to California. and took your ABEM boards and became board certified in emergency medicine. Since then, lots of a variety of things. You're president of the California ASEP, chair of emergency medical services in LA County. Ultimately got an MBA in healthcare from UC Irvine, which I want to learn more about. You've worked in hospital staffing companies. You've worked as an ER consulting companies. You've worked in billing companies. You've worked in health plan companies. You've worked for independent physician association companies. You've done prior authorizations. So pretty much everything within medicine that I can think of. I'm sure that there are plenty more, but so tell us a little bit about all those different careers inside medicine. When you look back, which version of yourself felt the most fulfilled? Let me ask it that way.
Well, I kind of followed my instincts in a lot of these, and so I will backtrack to when I first went away to university, where at one point in time, people were going out partying. When I first arrived, I was reluctant to join them, and they all left. And then I'm sitting there on a Saturday night in the empty dorm, thinking, "Why am I doing this?" So I immediately changed my strategy to saying yes. And my career was essentially a series of saying yes. An opportunity presented itself, and I said, let's say yes. And what you learn in business is that business is mainly sales. You're always trying to convince somebody that you can help them with their particular problem. And when they say, okay, here you go, you may not have a clue how you're actually going to solve this. You've got some potential ideas, but you say yes. And so I followed various opportunities that arose. And I really have to say that in emergency medicine, my career was defined by the people that I met in Cal ASEP and ASEP. I joke and say the first job I got in Los Angeles was answering an ad in the back of a journal. And after that, it was, calling friends and saying, hey, I'm getting the idea I'd like to move on and try something different. Do you know anybody who's hiring? And more often than not, they said, well, I'd like to get a chance to work with you. We'll make a position for you. And careers and jobs were created sort of out of thin air, so to speak, often. And it was everything to do with friendship and camaraderie and what we used to call us old guys, the Rolodex, right?
Yeah.
Is the people staying in touch with the people that you meet. And I keep on saying again to the younger generation, keep your connections up, especially within your professional society, because you may be working in LA, but you'd like to work in Philadelphia. Well, you may have met somebody at an ASEP conference who runs a contract in Philadelphia. That'll get you a job much faster than just going online.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are two great points. One is that how important relationships are, to not only your future career possibility, but just to the enjoyment of your career in general, right? It's so I retired formally from the emergency department this past February. I don't miss the patient work that much. I do miss the relationships that I have with colleagues and team members and things like that. That's definitely more I think impactful over time. The patients will always be there. But it's the relationships that you make with your colleagues that are irreplaceable. And you're right also about the saying yes. In fact, one of my questions was going to be where all these transitions between all these various aspects of non-clinical work, intentional or opportunistic. And I think you answered that question. I think it really is, you probably didn't have it all planned out ahead of time. You just said, okay, well, that sounds interesting at the time. Let's add that skill to my toolbox, and which really makes for an interesting career, but also lots of transition opportunities.
Right. Well, one of the most fantastic opportunities I had was I had worked for a not a billing company, but it was basically a company that provided office and administrative services for various groups and hospitals and the rest of it, and become very friendly with one of the vice presidents. And I got a call out of the blue, and he said, I got a doctor who owns 15 hospitals in 45 states who's looking for someone to run his health plan. And I think you'd be ideal for it. And I thought, sure, I've never run a health plan before. What can go wrong kind of
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
But he had already vetted me, and he just met with the president of the company, the owner of the company, and put my name in there. So when I arrived, I already had somebody who they had trusted, who was my backer, and it was one of the easiest hiring processes ever, because I met with him and his executive vice presidents, two of them, and after 3/4 an hour or so, he said, "Okay, you got the job."
Yeah.
And as with most jobs too, it what you're looking for when you're looking for a business partner or somebody to work for you, I believe, and whether it's in the emergency or not, you're looking for somebody who wants to be there, who's going to do their best, and not just when things are going well, but somebody who you can count on when they don't, because that's the big unknown. You can't always plan if you're running a group, or you're running a contract, or if you're in any business situation, on all the eventualities. You know that the wheels are going to fall off at some point, but you want somebody else who will be there by your side at 2 o'clock in the morning, and who's going to be doing some of the heavy lifting alongside you. And
Yeah.
and so again, that's one of the other things that I tell people, is that enthusiasm counts for a lot. If you really do want the job, tell them you want the job. Ask for it. Make
Yeah.
it obvious.
No, and I think it's so important, especially, in fact, we had chatted a little bit about this before we pushed record, but how important it is for physicians to have side gigs, and because I think it does several things. One is that it creates relationships, which can lead to other things, even if the side gig that you said yes to may not be your ultimate dream goal. I mean, it's creating skills that you can adapt to other things. And then as you develop those relationships with people, your reputation gets out that you are somebody that can think outside the box or work well with the team, or just have some other perspective that the run of the mill physician may not have. So tell me what you think, or how you advise younger doctors to create that kind of purposeful movement, I guess.
Well, I think again, it requires some self-analysis, so to speak, to find out where your skill sets are. And sometimes we limit ourselves by thinking our skill sets are, I'm good at inserting central lines, or I'm good at teaching the paramedics, and they miss the fact that something like teaching paramedics, for instance, involves organizational skills. You have to pull together a group of people. You have to try to understand the different needs of everyone. You have to try to speak to them on their own language. What else? What other kind of jobs might have that opportunity? Would it be in something in the public health, or related to the EMS commission, for instance, is where I got a lot of opportunity to meet some really incredible people who are providing pre-hospital care. Um, so again, don't limit yourself. The second is, um, the one of the uh, opportunities that I had was to encounter the first iteration of managed care, and it became obvious that it was a failure. the idea of paying doctors to not refer patients so that you could keep the money that the referral would be costing. And all of a sudden, every PCP became an endocrinologist and a cardiologist, and the patients knew the difference. And but on the other hand, there was an element of truth there. So I went back to get an MBA to understand it and realized that what I didn't know was that we spoke a different language in medicine than in business. Business is about a bunch of different parameters. They're very easy to figure out if somebody will explain them to you, break them down. But for the rest of my career, I often joked and said, I'm often doing a translating function here. I'm taking the business case, what the business people want to achieve, and I'm turning it into language that the physicians and techs and ancillary personnel can understand. And then I'm taking their comments, which sometimes are, no, we can't do this, it's dangerous, and taking them back to the business people and say, you're going to fail because you're attacking them on a core level. I mean, they got into this because they wanted to make a difference with patients, and you're asking them to somehow subjugate that to a profit margin. They don't get it. It's not in their DNA to want to do that. And so translating back and forth and being a bridge between business and medicine was a lot of fun. And every job after I got my MBA had some element of that.
Yeah. Well, and super important too. I mean, I think that if we had more physicians getting MBAs, getting on the business side of medicine, and bringing our perspective as providers to the business guys that look at patients in a different way than we look at patients. They're very numbers oriented and margins and bottom line. And sometimes when you're trying to take care of patients in the right way, you have to do some things that maybe aren't exactly the best thing from a business sense, because you're taking care of humans. So I applaud you for getting an MBA. I applaud you for going back and being that translator to the business people, because we just need more doctors doing that. And the other thing that you mentioned, I think, is how you can take your skills that you learn, and maybe they're not, maybe they're the soft skills, about communication, breaking down complex concepts into bite-sized chunks. That we learn that multitasking. We learn those skills as physicians that can then be applied to whatever else you decide to do, whether it's becoming a financial advisor or working in a health administration or working in a veterinary clinic, or startup, which is another part of what you have going on. But I think that that's an important part of that side gig school, if you will. So tell me about, when did you continue working clinically through all this, all of these shifts within your career, or did you leave the clinical work behind as you kind of started doing a lot more of this business and administrative stuff?
Yeah, I had a problem working clinical shifts, and as I started to get more involved administratively, typically meetings are held in the business world Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 kind of idea, in whatever time zone you're in. Yeah. And so I had to typically work my shifts on the weekends, my clinical shifts on the weekends, which was okay. But I found, for me, the magic number was 6. If I didn't do 6 clinical shifts a month, I was losing my timing. I was losing that intuitive approach that we take. I describe it as, you look into the crystal ball and it's all kind of cloudy, and then little points of light appear. And when you can connect dots to make a pattern, you move on to the next patient. And people sort of say, I somehow thought it was sort of more linear and more planning and the rest of it. But what I see it as,
There's a
we're
lot of
using a right
intuition
and
for
left
sure.
side of our brain. We're
Yeah.
using the knowledge we've accumulated and our impressions of the patients, and those good diagnoses we make are often a combination of those where something just doesn't fit here. There's a piece of the
Yeah.
puzzle that it
It's
doesn't
the
match.
voice inside your head that says, think again. Is
Yeah,
that what you're doing? Yeah.
yeah. Well, so anyway, I didn't want to lose my timing. I didn't want to be the boxer who shouldn't have fought the last fight. And so when my number got down low, and then one weekend, I was working a shift or scheduled to work a night shift on a Saturday night, and I got a call Saturday morning from the CEO of one of our hospitals who said, um, "Your director is not working out. He's got to be gone." And I said, "Okay, how long do I have to replace him?" She said, "I want you here on Monday morning
Oh,
uh, to give him the bad news." Uh, I thought,
thank you.
okay, I got to find a director. This was a midwestern rural hospital, and she had very high goals and aspirations for her director. So she wanted a board certified emergency physician, and and so I said, anything else I should know? She said, yeah, I want him to keep working here clinically because we need him. He's a really good clinician. And I thought, okay,
That's good.
not
Yeah.
too much to ask. But so I
Yeah.
had to line up, coverage for my shift. I had to get on a plane. I'll spend all day Sunday getting out there and prepping for the meeting on Monday and the rest of it. And I realized this was going to be increasingly a problem, which was working and administrative. So at that point, I willingly gave up the clinical part. Um, I missed it a lot. I missed the fact that even though in emergency medicine we say, you need to have an arm that's long enough to pat yourself on the back because your patients are not going to do that.
Yeah.
Um, in
Or your
business,
hospital administrators mostly.
well, in business, it happens much less frequently. No
Yeah.
surprise. The number of compliments you get is it's like the expectation is you're going to do an excellent job. Don't screw it up, kid.
Yeah.
Um, and so I really did miss that positive feedback from patients because I think that kept me going for so many years through a lot of trials and tribulations when I was practicing clinically, which is the idea I am helping people. They do appreciate it. They are thankful. And but when I got when that started to happen, then I realized I had to do full-time administrative.
And
And
how far into your career were you at that point?
well, so let's see, 27, 37 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I had been, like I said, cutting down on the number of shifts as I was
Yeah.
doing more administrative work, but I had had a long career. Now,
Yeah.
again, the beginning of my career started in a rural general practice, which is
Right.
catching babies and
Mhm.
assisting in the operating room and managing fresh MIs in the ICU and all
Mhm.
that sort of stuff.
So when you made that full transition to administrative, um, did you did you have an identity crisis? Or since you were still working within medicine, did it ease that a little bit?
Well, I, I have to admit that for a while I said, how do I replace something as meaningful as this day to day affirmation that I'm helping people with something as kind of obscure as, am I making a difference in administration?
Yeah.
And I realized that um, if I was, say, I was regional director over 5 hospitals, um, that if I could impact through something that was beneficial. If I could negotiate, if it was, say, a hospital uh, group that was working for a multi-hospital company like a Tenet or an HCA or something like that, if I could impact something with HCA that would impact 4 or 5 different hospitals, then I would be impacting all the doctors who work there,
Yeah.
and in turn impacting the patients. So if I could make the doctors' lives better by being the interpreter and being the champion and the ombudsman and the rest of it, then I could continue to make a difference. It was more nebulous, and I wouldn't see it on a day-to-day basis, but I knew that I would be making a difference. And so I kind of started to think, I want to have a bit of a champion role here, and I may not always be popular with the company that I'm working for, or whatever, because I may not be telling them what they want to hear. But on the other hand, um, I had never had trouble finding a job. So, what's the worst they can do? Fire me, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah. Sometimes
and,
you hope that happens.
and and getting back to the, well, we sort of little touched on burnout. If you burnout tends to happen when you're trapped, right? You have no exit. Exit. There's no
Yeah.
exit strategy in mind. You always need an exit strategy, if forever possible. Whether it's just living off of your savings, you know this better than I do. I can't preach to a financial advisor about this,
You're okay.
but you need to have a cushion financially, but you also need to keep your connections going so that if uh, the milk goes sour here, you can start to develop a connection for another potential opportunity, and that gives you often the confidence to live through a tough situation without feeling trapped.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's the power of financial independence, right? Is
Right.
the ability to say no to stuff and walk away.
Yeah.
So now you're no longer trapped. Doesn't mean that you have to stop working. I mean, it just means that now your world is opened up because you can you can take risk in opportunities that otherwise you may not feel comfortable taking that risk in because you feel like financially you're not. I mean, you're tied to that particular role. So yeah, absolutely. Financial preparation helps create that career freedom that then you can align that to your values. So you can think of money as a tool to get you there.
Yeah,
So I,
and sometimes, when I sorry to interrupt you here,
no, you're
um,
good.
uh, not infrequently when I went from one job to another, I took a pay cut,
Yeah,
um, because the job looked good, and
yeah,
I thought, I had learned to live not like a resident, but I'd learned
right.
to live within my means,
Yeah,
and not take expensive vacations unless I had a windfall of money to be
right.
able to do that, but not using debt to finance the fun stuff.
Exactly.
And lo and behold, a year or two later, gosh, with bonuses and the rest of it, I was doing it better financially than I had in the old one. And
Yeah,
that's often the case, is that if you demonstrate value, you you then will
absolutely.
be able to get ahead. But if you're I remember in my business school, they said, don't be a commodity.
Right.
And emergency physicians are considered by CEOs to be all uniform.
Yeah,
Everybody who works at my hospital is good, and if I
yeah,
bring in another group, they're all going to be good too. So you're
right.
not differentiating yourself. So you're like
Yeah,
gasoline. Okay, what's the cheapest per gallon price? I'm going to fill up there. And after 5 or 10 years in working clinically, and you say, I need a raise, and the person who's the one who's firing says, well, I can hire a new resident for less than I'm paying you. Um, so why should I pay you more?
yeah, and we're seeing that all over. I mean, it's that corporatization of emergency medicine and independent groups are being replaced because of that very reason. Is they haven't created that irreplaceability, you
Yes,
know,
uniqueness, right?
that the uniqueness that keeps their job. And so and that's on a group level. On an individual level, yeah, I think we underestimate the power that we have or the power that we can create by creating that uniqueness. And that's looking outside the box. It's looking for other opportunities. It's developing relationships that are just outside of your group. You have to do that.
Well, so I'll kind of open the kimono here a little bit and say that, I was involved in not a lot, but a few takeovers where the group I was with took over a contract. And we would meet with the CEO before the contract changes hands and say, okay, who do you want to keep? Who do you want to go immediately? And who are you okay with, but we should replace them over the next year or two? And I think docs are shocked by that thought that they may be considered like, which shoes do I want to wear today kind of idea.
Yeah.
But the 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 attractiveness of physicians often has to do with their relationships with the staff. Hey, do you get along well with the nurses? Do you get along well with the attending physicians? Those are the things that the CEO's listening to, because those are the people that run his business or her business. Sure. And so you want to be one of those people who they immediately say, oh yeah, keep Brian. He's a great guy. I like him. I've met him. I mean, he saw my kid when the child came in with a broken toe or whatever. But we're not.
Yeah, definitely. The capacity as a physician or the skills as a physician is a given, right? I mean,
right.
That's not what separates you. That's considered a given. If you're credentialed, and especially if you're board certified, you should know how to take care of patients. It's how you deal and communicate with the team that different, or other skills that you bring to the table that differentiate you.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I want to shift gears just a little bit and say, you've had a long career, you've had a long life within medicine. Looking at you as your, I don't know, let's say mid-career 40-year-old self, 45-year-old self, envisioning what your retirement was going to look like, or what you thought it was going to look like. How did things change? How is it different in reality than what you thought it was going to be when you were 40?
Well, first of all, when I was 40, one of the fortuitous things that happened is my wife was talking to she was a cardiac rehab nurse, so she was talking to some of the business people who were she was seeing, and they said, do you have a financial planner who's helping you? And she said, well, we've got somebody who sells us stocks. And no, he said, a financial planner. And so lined us up with somebody who set me on a path for my retirement, who I wouldn't be able to retire. Automatic monthly withdrawals from my checking account into an investment account. And then we follow that strategy for our daughter when she wanted to when she was born. And that allowed her to graduate from vet school without any debt. So setting those things in progress early on was very important in terms of allowing
not just assuming it's going to happen by default.
Yeah, or necessarily assuming that I was a brilliant investor and I was going to make all I was going to listen to the stock tips when we had a physician's lounge we would go to, right? And everybody
that's the most dangerous place financially, is the physician's lounge.
I guess nowadays even TikTok, right? Or
yeah,
whatever,
exactly.
Where or wherever you're going to get your information from. But with me, retirement looked like it was going to be pretty calm. I was winding down. I'd gone through COVID. I'd been able to get a job where I was working remotely. And then one morning, I came back after driving my daughter and husband to the airport. And I went in to check on my wife. She hadn't gotten up yet. And I found her incontinent and unrousable, meaning she had a seizure, no seizure disorder, a generalized seizure, and was essentially unrousable. So I immediately called 911. They were going to divert. The local hospitals were on diversion. they were going to take her to this little tiny boutique hospital, which I said is not the place I want my wife to be. So
Yeah.
I talked to the head paramedic, and we kind of, did the secret handshake. And I said, I need to go to this local hospital, which is the best hospital. And he said, gee, I guess they just opened up. And so she got treated in the hall because, of course, there were not even any hall beds. But in front of the nursing station, they whisked her up for EEG and a CT scan, and the neurologist on call that day came down and said, this pattern resembles herpes simplex encephalitis that she's got. She's got specific problems with her parietal lobe on both the EEG and the CT. We're going to start her on acyclovir IV right now in the hall. And that probably saved her life, and certainly saved her from being in a vegetative state if she did
and your
survive.
advocacy to get her to the right place also
Yeah.
made all the difference.
And so immediately my world was turned upside down. She was in a coma for a week. She was in and out of the hospital 5 times that first year for a total of 90 days. She was getting breakthrough seizures. It took every bit of my medical knowledge and the rest of it to kind of maneuver her through the healthcare system, which was an eye opener about how complex and difficult it is, and how much all of the experience I had came to bear here.
Imagine having to do that without the experience that you being
exactly.
on both sides.
It wouldn't have happened. I mean, she was having, when she got out of the hospital, she was having these spells. We didn't know what it was, but she would go to bed and be fine at night, and then wake up in the morning and be confused for about a day. And I finally took her to see a neurologist who was on call for her, regular neurologist who had just finished his epilepsy training as an epileptologist fellowship. And he said, oh, she needs to go to the epilepsy management unit for a week and see whether and be wired up and see whether she's having silent seizures. I said, I'd never heard of an epilepsy management unit. He said, yeah, there's only 2 in Southern California, one where I trained and one at Cedars. And since I'd been working at Cedars, I pulled some strings and got her in there and found out she was having breakthrough seizures. Well, I didn't even know that as a emergency physician who worked at a bunch of different hospitals. The average person would have been, no, she would just continue to have them. But, she was a different person when she finally got out of the hospital. The disease process causes necrosis of the brain, so she lost short-term memory, has some expressive aphasia, executive functioning, and I miss her. I miss the wife I married.
Yeah. How many years ago was this?
So this was 2024 when it happened. So not very long ago. 23. 23 was when she had her.
Just 3 years. Wow.
And 3 years. And so so it's been a journey. She came home and did not adapt well to being at home. She didn't have her driver's license, so she couldn't drive, and we're in a kind of a little bit of an isolated urban community here in Los Angeles, and so there's no place to walk to, and the neighbors had all aged along with us, so nobody was communicating, and she was lonely. Yeah. So I finally overcame the negative feelings that we often have as caregivers, that I can provide the best care. Why would I let somebody else provide care when I can do a better job? She's currently in a memory care unit, which is 15 minutes away, and I see her every day. And that's when I completely retired, was realizing, why am I doing this? So I went to my financial planner and said, do I need to work? And he said, no, you don't. They said you've
Yeah.
got enough of your savings and your lifestyle is easy enough that you don't have to work. Don't buy a Porsche though.
Yeah.
And
No.
and then we were lucky too. Early on, we got long-term care insurance when it was affordable. Like
Mm,
again, back in our 40s or 45 or whatever. And
yeah.
so her care at this point is being financed out of long-term care insurance, which
Yeah.
is I mean, typically minimum of $6,000 to $10,000 a month.
Yeah. 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 Especially in the memory care units. It's, um, I resonate with your story. My kids have, I have two adult special needs kids. So it's kind of the other side of the caregiving spectrum. But, just understanding where what you thought things were going to be turns out that that's not in the cards. And so we people when your life is derailed, I think is a fair way of saying it, but when your life is derailed, how do you adapt, how do you adjust? And I think that there's a couple ways that people do it, and some are turns they it turns negative, and they lose their purpose in life, and others can turn it in a more positive way. And so my question is, how did you, obviously this is not the retirement that you had envisioned, I'm sure, in terms of whatever you had hoped to be able to do, travel together, visit family, visit kids. How have you been able to reinvent retirement so that you're still finding meaning and joy?
Well, one thing when it became obvious that she needed an institutional placement was I immediately had a family conference. I asked her. She had two adult children with were blessed with grandchildren from them. I asked them to come to town. Our daughter and her husband, I asked them to be here. And we sat down and we talked about, and I said, look, I'm going to give you everything I know about her clinical history and what I've learned from all the specialists. And I'm going to explain to you the financial situation we're in right now. And I want to talk to you about where we're going to go forward. And because I want your input and I want you to help me and to help her. And it worked out very well because they continue to be involved. And I see them as my advisory board, so to speak.
Yeah.
And again, just last night, her son came up from the Caribbean with the son-in-law who lives in Washington D.C. They were in town and they came to visit Susan, and they've been doing that pretty much every day since they got here a couple of days ago. Because again, she is precious to all of us, and so I don't feel alone. I can't imagine anything worse than not having any kind of support systems. My support system is family, and I really, I really, if if there's one message I want to get out to your listeners, is if you have any problems, family related problems, if for some reason you've drifted apart, or especially if you haven't gotten along with each other, please think about mending it. Old age is lonely, and family are the ones that know your history and you can share stories. And it's just, it's, I can't, it would be so empty if I didn't have all of them in my life and be close to them. And that's helped me definitely helped keep me going.
I think that's such an important message. I mean, over and over again in the financial world, um, you learn that money is a tool, it's not a goal, and that's not the source of happiness. And at the end, at the end of life, so the true source of happiness is the deep and meaningful relationships that you have with the people around you, whether that's your family, whether it's friends, whether it's colleagues. That's what keeps people going and makes their life meaningful. And, I love what you said about how important it is to create a team, especially if you are a caregiver. And again, I know that myself from my own personal experience, but that will become even more important as I age to the point where I can't, my wife and I can't be the ones to be the primary caregivers anymore. Um, to have to create that team of people, whether it's family or non-family, but create that team of people that you can transition that care to, so that because you can't do it forever and you can't do it by yourself. And so it's such important message, and that also takes planning. So your retirement, I think one of the great messages from you is that yes, financial planning is important for retirement, but that's not the only type of planning that's important. It's life planning, it's transition planning, it's caregiving, it's all the other things. It's bringing your family in and being sure that they're included in all that. And so yeah, thank you for sharing.
And also too, in my case, it was going from 60 to 0 over in 5 minutes or 30
Yeah,
seconds when I realized my whole life was turned upside down.
yeah,
And so treasure each day. It's a cliche, and the cliche doesn't really come home until you've had someone who's close to you who all of a sudden is gone. Um,
yeah,
and unfortunately, as we age, we find that people who, for whatever reason, um, I think often just bad luck, are gone. And I just talked to them last week, kind of idea. Well,
yeah,
do they know that you cared about them? Do they
yeah,
know, how important they were to you?
yeah, yeah. There are no givens, right? There are
Right.
no givens in life. and
Yeah.
and if what you envision your retirement to be may not be what it is because of health or loss of life or all kinds of things. So you can't keep putting off those things that are important, that bring you meaning and joy, for some time in the future that may not happen. So
Yeah.
so I think a great lesson to just remember, live each and every day to the fullest, prepare for the future. You still have to prepare. But you might be missing out on a lot if you're only thinking about the future instead of
Right.
just maximizing your day. Awesome. Well, again, thank you for sharing that. Normally at the end of our conversations, we have what we call the reckoning. I don't know if you watched any of our other
I,
podcasts.
I didn't, because I didn't want to be biased. I didn't want to sort of
That's
say,
probably good.
so I thought, no, you had mentioned you wanted to be as spontaneous as possible, and I
Yeah,
appreciated that.
yeah. Good. No, I mean it's been a wonderful conversation so far. Now I'll tell you that normally my colleague is the one who does the reckoning. So basically, what the reckoning is just a few short answer questions, that there's no hedging. It's just like what comes first to your mind. And again, I'm going to look through a list of things and see which ones would be some good um, reckoning questions. Okay, actually, here's one. So I wrote a book called The Physician's Path to True Wealth. Um, in your mind, after the life that you lived and the career that you have, how would you define true wealth? What does it mean to be wealthy?
um, to, to me, it's not about money. It's about the people I met and the people I stay in touch with. And again, you know, my what I consider the true wealth is the friendships, um, and the family. Part of the reason emergency medicine was so attractive to me is I got a chance to talk to people about things that weren't, a little bit tangential. Oh,
Yeah.
you work for uh, Rocketdyne. What's it like to be a rocket scientist? Kind of idea.
Yeah.
And I just enjoy people and finding out about people. And to be true wealth is to be able to have those sort of experiences. It's not about he who dies with the most toys wins.
Yeah. And I actually find that really interesting because the more people that I ask that question or basically talk to about finances, the older you get, the less money means, the less stuff matters. And the more relationship and experiences and things like that are what really make a difference in life. And so, obviously you want to have the money that will help sustain you and give you the optionality that you want to create, to be able to create those opportunities. But that's why it's a tool and not the goal. Yeah. So thank you. Okay. Here's the next question. What advice would you give physicians approaching retirement who are anxious about losing identity or relevance?
Make sure that you do some serious thinking on this topic, and I think it's an excellent one, excellent question. Is if you haven't planned to do more than just golf, um, you're going to die sooner. The research is absolutely strong on this. If you lose your sense of personal identity, um, I, I have lots of identities, as you could tell from the various jobs that I've had and the rest of it. So I was lucky. I kind of learned how to put on different hats, kind of idea. But again, if you stick with all of us should actually have like a mission statement and a vision statement about what we want to do. And um, yeah, I'm just looking here. I have a little thing posted on the wall here. Embrace life, gentle with all, never ever regrets. And and then my mission statement is to make people successful. So in my retirement, I find meaning in trying to help people, even if it's not anything to do with medicine, even if it's just, go to the dry cleaners and say, there's a better way you could be hanging those clothes. Well, lots of times I think they think, what the hell is he talking about? I didn't ask for
Yeah.
that information. But
Yeah.
but again, you find meaning sometimes in the funniest places, and you find often, as we did during our careers, that you can make a difference in people's lives when you didn't even notice that what you
Yeah.
said, that one comment, changed their life or changed their path. So think about how you can continue to do what we went into this
Yeah.
calling to do, which is to help people. How can you
Yeah.
continue to help people on some sort of level so you continue to do this? Because we obviously are hardwired to do this to a degree that is beyond the normal population. Physicians
Yeah.
sacrifice a lot to be physicians, and so I think make sure there's some meaning in your life that way.
I think that's great advice. We're healers by nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's we became doctors because we're healers and we want to help people. And even if you don't have the white coat on anymore, there's so many ways you can heal people. And sometimes it's just with a smile
Yeah.
and just making their day a little bit better. So I think that being purposeful about that, I think is how you don't lose your identity as a healer, because you don't need to when after you're retired. So great advice. Okay, here's the third question. What do you wish your 35-year-old self understood about career and life?
Um, that that a door would open before the previous door closed. That that I didn't need to be worried about taking chances. That I could um, be bolder. That I could do more. That I could risk failure more than I did. I was very risk adverse at the beginning of my career because here's a Canadian in Los Angeles who knows nobody. how am I going to, be able to create an identity here? So I was very cautious in the beginning, and I realized the more that I took chances, the more successful I was. Well, I wasn't always successful because you don't succeed. Nobody's got a batting average of 1,000 kind of idea. But on the other hand, the more you try, the more you succeed. And so
It's,
I would say, so be bolder.
yeah, even failure is a learning experience that can leverage you for your next opportunity, right? And so
Right.
I think that's also great advice. And I found that looking back on the chances that I took also, they didn't always work out 100%, but they always worked out.
Yeah.
It always worked out in my benefit in one way or the other. And I think that so many of us are afraid to take chances because of that, especially those who are high achievers enough to become doctors. I think in some ways we're afraid of failing more because, we're used to not failing. And so failure is scary. And, but yeah, I think that that's wonderful.
Well,
Awesome
when
advice.
you're working in the ER, I mean, you can see
Yeah, you can't fail.
20, you can see 20 people a day who have failed, you know? I
Right.
mean, there's just a constant litany of people who tried something and did it wrong. And
That's right. Well, and plus in the, as physicians, we are, conditioned not to fail, because
yes,
failure as a physician means somebody could get injured or lose their life even. And so there's a very high risk of failure as a physician. And so clinically, and so
right.
taking, you know, being able to put that aside and try something outside of your comfort zone can be a challenge, I think, for a lot of doctors. Okay, Fred, it's been an awesome conversation. I hate to end it, but eventually people will stop listening. So, thank you again for joining us today. Normally, what we do afterwards is that if Aaron were here, he and I would kind of break down the conversation, pick out some highlights, and end the podcast that way. I'll either have him do that with me when he's available, or I'll just do it myself. But anyway, it's been wonderful. I think you've given us many pearls of wisdom. Good luck with your family. Best wishes for your wife. Best wishes in your formal retirement now, and I hope that you can continue to find the meaning and joy as you help others. So
Thank you.
thanks again.
Thank you, man.
All right, everybody. This is the time where we recap our conversation with Dr. Fred Dennis. I thought it was a really good conversation. He had a lot to say, a lot of great pearls. He's obviously lived a long career and a long life, full of ups and downs, but lots of challenges or lots of opportunities that he took advantage of. I think one of the important things that he taught us is the importance of saying yes when opportunities arise. So he mentioned that not all of his career path was necessarily planned. But it happened by saying yes when opportunities came up. And that led him to new things that he may not have ever anticipated, especially as an early emergency medicine physician. But I think so many of us just forget, to step out of our comfort zone and to say yes to things as they come up. And it's hard, we're busy as is. Feels like saying yes to other things is just adding to that and maybe contributing to burnout. But in reality, I think creating those other streams of income or at least streams of attention can often prolong our careers because it gives us exit ramps for one, but also just adds variety to our work life. And, ultimately it helps us be able to choose the things that we like to do and, maybe pay somebody else to do the things that we don't like to do. The other important thing I think he taught us is that a lot of times it's who developing those relationships is critical in terms of finding new jobs and new opportunities. And I certainly see that a lot with young people in the workforce or trying to get into the workforce and are having difficulty in spite of education and in spite of You know, talent, lots of times they don't even get their foot in the door because they don't have the people that they haven't made those relationships yet. And so cultivate those as you're going through your work life, because those relationships are what you can leverage, so that later on you can find the opportunities when you need one. He was a great example of how, if he started getting bored in his career, it sounds like he just called somebody up and said, "Hey, what kind of opportunities do you know about?" Or and lots of times those were just created for him because those people wanted to work with him. That kind of leads me to my next point about, and I don't know if this is a word, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Decommoditize. Lots of times, and more, it seems that physicians are becoming commodities, and certainly are commodities to the business folks that are making decisions about your career and the hospital that you work in. Sometimes there's nothing that you can do about those transfers, but when it happens, and if you're bought out, and and they're those that new company is asking who they should keep and who they should let go, um, set yourself apart by adding broader skills than what is expected by any physician that would fill your role, but also by forging good working relationships. I found that for sure is that, if you ask nurses or techs or some of the other members of the team who they like to work with, they don't shy away from answering that question. And they know who the doctors are that are that the patients like, that communicate well, and that work well as a team. And that, I think that goes with any career, whoever your team members are. You set yourself apart by being a good team member and a team leader. And so that will help you keep a job and will help you find new ones if you don't just become a commodity to those people who are making decisions above you. All right. I think the most important thing that he talked to us about is that there are no guarantees in life. What a challenging experience that he's had with his wife, how difficult that must be, especially as you're just approaching your retirement years, almost there. And suddenly your vision for what retirement was going to look like is drastically changed. He taught that how you get through that is with your family. It's the relationships around you. It's cherishing and nourishing those relationships. I thought it was very powerful when he talks about the loneliness of being elderly, and I think that happens a lot. I think that's there's a high depression rate in elderly folks. And mostly, I think that is because they're lonely and they've lost skills, they've lost opportunities. There's a lot of loss in retirement and in old age. So the last thing that you want to lose is the relationships that add meaning and joy to your life. That's your most important asset. You can have all the money in the world. If you don't have those relationships, you're not going to have the same quality of life that you would otherwise have had. So I think his story amplifies that, and it's something that we all should remember. All right. So again, thank you to Dr. Fred Dennis. I appreciate the time and his openness about his story. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Second Shift Podcast. Please tell your friends about us, subscribe and like to the channel. I think that does help get the word out there, help sustain us. So if you are finding this information useful, please do that. Also, if you are interested in learning about your own or learning more about your own second shift, we do have the second shift blueprint that is available on our website at Second Shift. That's the number 2 ndpodcast.com. Please download that. 5 important conversation questions that you need to ask with your significant other before you take on your next second shift. And feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Take care.
The work you did mattered, and you're not done. Welcome to What's Next.
Thank you for listening to The Second Shift. If this conversation landed with you, please download our free guide called The Second Shift Blueprint. 5 questions you and your partner should discuss before any major transition. Get it at secondshiftpodcast.com. That's number 2 ndshiftpodcast.com. And if you're approaching a transition and want to talk through the financial strategy, we offer a complimentary 30-minute Second Shift audit. Details are at secondshiftpodcast.com/audit. Join us next week for another great episode. And remember, your life and identity doesn't end with retirement. It's just entering its second shift. The content shared in this podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered personal financial advice. You should always consult with a financial professional to determine what is appropriate for your individual circumstances.